Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next portion of Peter Jackson's retirement celebration. I think most of you in here know me. For those of you who don't, I'm Catherine Caggiano. I had the great honor to be one of Peter's PhD students once upon a time. I currently have the pleasure of directing the Master of Engineering program here in the School of ORIE, and looking around and seeing the many individuals here who have been not only undergraduates and PhDs, but also Master of Engineering students, that's really a joy to me to see this. So, as Uday mentioned earlier, I love this acronym, JMMR. So I have the pleasure of introducing the R of JMMR, Robin Roundy, Professor of Mathematics at Brigham Young University and Professor Emeritus of the School of ORIE here at Cornell. And it's always a pleasure to see Robin back here. So and I thought about how am I going to introduce Robin. I thought, let me just jot a few things down, because when I think about Robin and I think about Peter, there are actually quite a few parallels here. So not only they both completed their graduate work at Stanford, they both came to Cornell here in the early 1980s, both making significant contributions in the areas of capacity planning, lot sizing, production scheduling, among many other important areas. Both of them have devoted their heart and soul to the Master of Engineering program, so I'm very delighted. They provided just absolutely invaluable guidance and experiences to hundreds, if not thousands, of Master of Engineering students, thereby allowing me to have a job today. So thank you, Robin. Very, very grateful. One thing also, I think that both of them, while they're here concurrently, they're sort of perpetual winners of the ORIE's Nicest Guy Award. It was never really quite clear, who was on top. But every year I think it was Robin. Oh, what a great guy. Peter, fantastic. The nicest guy you'll ever meet. And I think that that's something that they both share, certainly to this day.
Peter Jackson was the nicest guy. Robin Roundy was the most enthusiastic.
Excellent. Okay, so this is good.
Yeah. But,
change the engraving on the award. Perhaps, just the last parallel, and this goes for both Peter and Robin, that's true of both of them. I haven't quite accepted the fact that they're both not at Cornell anymore. So it's really an honor to be here today, Peter, and to be able to invite you up here, Robin. So thank you.
It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I'd like to just make a few comments about what's been said. I've been accused of being a nice guy. And I found out a few years when I became department chairs and my opinions actually started to matter, the number of people who considered me a nice guy just kind of went down a little bit. So last year, the last speaker was Chris, and of course Peter. I discovered that I have one thing in common with both of these guys, which is I really enjoy programming computers. And there's one difference, which is those two are actually good at it, unlike me. But it's been a very, very enjoyable day, and I'm deeply grateful to Peter and to many, many of my colleagues who are here, former students, who have just made my life extremely rich and deeply rewarding. And I really appreciate that. And I want you to know that. So anyway, in honor of Peter Jackson, I'm going to talk briefly about some new research, and then I'm going to take a little stroll down memory lane because I enjoy that. Okay? So first I'm going to talk about something that I did with an undergraduate at, starting point there, that doesn't work very well, with Clark Pixton, who we did this when he was an undergraduate. He's now at MIT working with David Simke-Levy. Okay? So this is stochastic job scheduling. Sounds like what Chris was talking about, but I'm not doing any Gantt charts. This is weighted tardiness with proportional weights. So the problem is, you've got a bunch of jobs to be scheduled on a single machine. Jobs have processing times which are random. And the goal is to minimize the weighted tardiness, approximately, because it is an NP-hard problem. Okay? And so I did the NP-hard stuff to David Schmoyes and Bob Bland, who's left, and I am happy with approximately, when approximately is reasonably close. Okay? So at any rate, the special property here is that the weights are proportional to the processing times, or at least approximately so. Okay? So this is NP-hard, but there was a ray of hope, which is that when the processing times are deterministic, you can prove a performance guarantee. And this was done with S.D. Arkin a while back. Okay? And the thing that made me think about this is I kept seeing places in industry where people were minimizing weighted tardiness, doing simply earliest due date sequencing, and it really worked well. You talk to the people and say, oh, it's a beautiful schedule. It does everything we want. And I knew a bit about NP hardness, and that was it, and I was having trouble figuring this out. And so I was thinking about it and realized that the places where I was seeing this work well were places where weights were proportional processing times. Okay? And in a sense, weighted tardiness is kind of a combination between maximum lateness, which is EDD, and shortest processing time, which is weighted shortest processing time. But when the weights are proportional to the processing times, weighted shortest processing time says do anything you feel like to, right? So it didn't seem to be that surprising. And so based on that intuition, Esty and I created this result, right? So there was a ray of hope. There was also a reasonable amount of dubiousness when we took this on, in that about 2 years after we published this result, I was talking with a guy who at that point in time was one of the best stochastic scheduling guys around. And he said, I spent 6 months trying to extend that result to random processing times and failed. So we took that on, but anyway. Let me say one other thing here, and that is the performance measure. Okay? Normally when you talk about performance measures, you say percentage deviation from optimality. And that doesn't work here, because epsilon is a very possible optimal cost. When you divide by epsilon, you get a really big number, right? So if you want to do a worst case optimality assessment with this kind of a problem, you need to divide by something which isn't going to be epsilon in the worst case. Because if it can be epsilon in the worst case, an actual cost that is a very small cost in the real world, you divide by epsilon and it looks really big. Okay? So we thought about what we're going to do here, and we decided that a reasonable measure of what a substantial cost is the cost of having every job be late by its own processing time. Okay? In this case, by its own mean processing time. So what we were able to prove was that if you just do an EDD schedule in this environment, this was the deterministic version, you'll be off from optimal by at most, in the worst case, half of the cost of having every job be late by its own processing time. So Clark and I took this on, and it's actually turned out to be quite fun. Okay? So, whoops, I did push the wrong button. People have been doing that all day long, including me. So the briefly, PJ is the processing time, WJ is the weight, which is proportional to the mean processing time. DJ is the due date, completion time is the random, completion time of the job, the due date is deterministic. Tardiness is how late the job is, right? So if completion time is bigger than the due date, then it's late by a certain amount of time. But if the completion time is earlier than the due date, you don't get credit for that. Okay? But you pay a penalty if you're late. Okay? So you multiply the tardiness by the weights and add it up and take the expectation, and this is what you're trying to optimize. And in many manufacturing settings, this really is a pretty sensible objective. Okay, so there's, I was just mentioning this together, right? Okay, there's an assumption that we'll be talking about, and that is that the processing times come from a Levi process. The Levi process is a random function, usually of time, but here I'm calling it x, right? It's stochastic, and it has IID increments. Okay, independent. If you take the increment, the way the change in the stochastic process L, it's simply a function of the length of the interval, and if the intervals don't overlap, then it's independent. So it's very simple, at least at the loose level of mathematics, to say what a Lie process is. If these things are non-negative, right, then they're often called Lie subordinators, okay, which is not as common a term. But we are interested in processing times that are non-negative. Right? So we actually deal with Lie subordinators rather than Lie processes. Okay? These things are not continuous, so you need to take a little bit of care. Okay? One intuitive way to think about a Lie subordinator is to take a compound Poisson process, which most people study in their first stochastic processes course, and take a limit as the number of jumps becomes massive and the sizes of the jumps become small, or at least a lot of the jumps become very small. And so a lot of these things in an interval of length 1, you'll have an infinite number of discontinuous jumps. And so these things can have an infinite number of discontinuities in a finite interval and be piecewise constant. Okay? So in that sense, they're not necessarily what we typically think of when we start drawing increasing graphs. Okay? But they're fun. I like them. Okay? And then to that, you can add simply a linear function with positive slope. And so Lie subordinators, loosely once again, can be described in that manner. And the Lie assumption is the processing times come from a Lie process. And so for each job, you've got an expected processing time, and the processing time of the job is proportional to the Lie process evaluated Lie processing time. And so if you think about this assumption and compare it to the real world, right, it's both enticing but limited. It's enticing because every infinitely divisible distribution matches, it's non-negative, matches a Lie subordinator. So there's a lot of these things. And some of them are very close to deterministic. Some of them are wildly stochastic. They can be as wildly stochastic as you want. Right? And so it's an extremely rich class when you're looking at the processing time of a single job. Okay? Yeah?
Is this the same out for all jobs, or just each job has its own out?
Okay. The processing times are independent. Okay? And so in the paper, there's 3 answers to that question, depending on what you're doing at the moment. But they are independent, okay? So I think that hopefully that answers your question. Okay. All right. So the other thing though is that all the jobs have to have a similar underlying structure because they all come from the same Lie process, right? So in some sense, the underlying structure of the randomness in one job is similar to the underlying structure of the randomness in another, even though their coefficients of variation are going to vary as the processing times vary. They can go all over the map if the processing times vary dramatically. Okay? And so this is a kind of structure which maps very well a lot of the things I've seen, but certainly not all of them. For example, if you have a machine, just once every so many hours it's going to fail. And it's going to take so long to fix. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. That fits this perfectly. Okay? A lot of other types of randomness that you would commonly see in real-world scheduling problems. This fits very naturally and very nicely. But we can easily imagine situations where it doesn't work. So, anyway, this is the Lie assumption, okay? And the main result here is that if you follow the simple EDD schedule, okay, the loss of optimality in using EDD versus the optimal schedule, which is impossible to do, is it lost 50% of the expected cost of having every job delayed by its own processing time, okay? Under the Lie assumption. If you don't make the Lie assumption, that ratio can be arbitrarily large. Okay? So this is what that other guy was trying to prove. And it's understandable he couldn't prove it because it's false. Okay? But if you make this assumption on the structure of the processing times, okay, then you get something that's actually very nice. Very nice and very effective. Okay? And so this is quite a big jump here, right? And I find it kind of fascinating. Okay? The optimality loss is not impacted at all by the degree of variability in the processing times. Coefficient of variation can be 1/100th or it could be 100. Who cares? Okay? The result is the same. So I find that fascinating. Right? And so, but it is impacted strongly by the fact that they have this similar underlying structure. They come from the same Levy subordinate. Why is this true? I can only answer that mathematically. And I'm not satisfied with that. I like to understand things intuitively as well as mathematically. And for this, I have no intuitive explanation. Okay? But it is true. Okay? And which other settings does a similar pattern hold? It's another interesting question. We're taking random stuff, we're sequencing it, we're taking some non-decreasing convex functions to be evaluated, we're taking expectations, we get this kind of result. What are the kinds of situations does this apply in? I've talked about two, it doesn't work in either one of those, but I really don't know. So anyway, that's a piece of fun that I've had recently. I've enjoyed that very much. And so if there's any comments, questions about that, let's do them now because I'm going to start walking down memory lane here. Okay? Any comments, questions on that?
So that's with an undergraduate student who knows levy processes?
Yeah.
Okay, you've got good undergraduate students.
He didn't know when I started.
Okay.
I've told a couple of people this. When a student walks into my office and says, I want to do research with you, I say, okay, you're going to do 15 to 20 hours a week of reading for 3 or 4 months, and then we'll actually start doing something. So he did. Okay. And, okay. So all right. Oh, I was going to say more of this. Yeah, we're doing okay now. Yeah. So there's two main theorems: lower bound and proximity of EDD. I'll say a little bit about the proofs. Okay. So this is the line upon which you draw a Grant chart, right? And if you do a Levy process, okay, it's a random function, all right? And that is the domain of the Levy process, and this is the range. And that is a graph of the inverse Levy process, right? And so it's backwards from the stochastic processes point of view, but it's forwards from the scheduling point of view, right? And so this is L inverse. L is the Levy subordinator. It's a random curve, and it is, if you apply the word work appropriately, this is the work I've accomplished by time t. I go to time t, I evaluate that guy, and that's how much work I've accomplished. Then you come up with a definition of, okay, by time t, I'm going to avoid tardiness. How much work do I have to accomplish by this time? I'm going to avoid tardiness in the future. And that is f. Right? It's also a random function. The first intuitive way to write that down didn't work, but the third and fourth one did. Right? So these are both random functions. And so if I look at this point in time, I say, gee, by this time, that is how much work I have accomplished, that is how much work I have to accomplish. I'm going to avoid tardiness, and that's bigger, and I'm in trouble. And in fact, the expected value of that shaded area is a lower bound on the weighted tardiness. Okay? So all of these are stochastic curves. Right? The expected bound of that area, if you do units of measure properly in both time and material, then, no, time and dollars. Okay? The expected value of that area is in fact a lower bound on the cost of any schedule. So that's the lower bound theorem. The proof of that is not that sophisticated from a mathematical point of view. Careful construction, sample path arguments. The last thing we do is take an expectation. Stochastic dynamic programming. When you're proving things with stochastic dynamic programming, you're always using induction. And that little inequality, which took us a while to figure that. Before we were going through ugly case analysis. Okay? But this is half of a line proof. And it saved us pages. It's really a step forward. But anyway, that is the proof. Then there's proximity of EDD to lower bound. You have to prove this is less or equal to that amount. This is the expected cost of having each job laid by its own processing time, scaled, so you don't have proportionality constant in there. And the proof is most of the things above, plus some very careful conditioning. So that's what I'm going to say about this one. Okay? Questions, comments before I start walking down memory lane? Okay? Yeah, I'm going to start walking down memory lane then. This, of all the things I've done with Peter, is the one I personally enjoyed the most. Okay? So I had to talk about it because I enjoyed it so much. Okay? So this is minimize a good old classical inventory theory credit cost function. T is the variable here. You've got this directed tree, right? And for each node, there is a t. And for each arc, you have a simple inequality constraint. Okay? So this is a special case of a problem that Maxwell and Muckstadt solved with some useful input from Mike, Todd, and from Bob Bland. And then Peter was talking about it with Mike Todd, and he said we need to do this differently, and Peter came back with this. And so that's where this came about. But so Peter and I were talking about this, and I started thinking about it. And the result was an unintelligible algorithm, 2.5 pages. I thought I could understand it, but I'm sure no one else could. And a proof, single proof, one big DP proof, 30 handwritten pages. And at the time, I was extremely confident in this. But it didn't take me long thinking about the process through which it was generated to realize it couldn't have possibly worked. Right? But at the time, I was extremely confident. I walked into Peter's office, a big smile, said, "Look at this, ain't it beautiful?" And Peter very appropriately and diplomatically communicated that the beauty could be approved. Peter's always extremely diplomatic and honest. And so it was good. So Peter, the one thing that was good that came out of that was some examples showing that it wasn't as easy at first period. Right? So Peter, he came up with I thought this was phenomenal. Absolutely beautiful. He put some structure on it. 9 different kinds of nodes. There were candidate nodes, defeated nodes, dominated nodes, final, isolated, lead, lower, upper nodes, and optimal nodes, right? And this was a migratory model. As the algorithm progressed, these nodes kept moving from one class to another, and it was beautiful and understandable. And he wrote 28 theorems, lemmas, and corollaries, which had 15 journal pages worth of proofs. And I thought it was beautifully understandable. And the referees either agreed or didn't want to confess they had not understood the proofs, one of the two. So it skated through. But I thought this was just beautiful. And after I saw this that Peter had done, I says, I'm not currently capable of doing that. And so I said, I've got to learn something here. And so this improved my ability to how I think about problems. So it was very enjoyable. Like I said, the things I've done with Peter, that was the one that to me personally was among the most satisfying. Okay? I'd like to talk about another piece of research that Peter was involved in. This one had a big impact on the way I think about problems, the way I approach problems, and the way I have formally attacked a number of problems. And that has to do with forecast evolution. Once again, I'm pointing there. This is not good. All right, so forecast evolution is the following concept. Right now, I have, say, last March 1st, last Monday, I created a forecast for the demand for Samsung Galaxy A phones in September 2017. Right? Or more accurately, I have not just a forecast, but I have some understanding of what the uncertainty is going to look like. So I have the distribution of some random variable, which describes what I currently am able to understand and know about the demand for Galaxy S8 cell phones next September. Okay. Well, the 1st of June, I'm going to do this all over again. And then I will have another forecast, and it will be a different random variable. Hopefully it's more accurate than the earlier one, so I'm closer to the date, but maybe not. Right? And so I'm currently forecasting the 24-month horizon. Right? So on September 1st of 2017, I will create a forecast of the September demand, right? And that will be the 24th forecast of the September 2017 demand that I created, right? And hopefully the later ones are more accurate than the earlier ones, right? And so, and today, our last Monday, May 1st, I created a forecast, and it's got 24 forecasts in it, right? Which span from the forecasted demand in May 2017 to the forecasted demand in April 29th. Right? I got all these forecasts, right? And this, by the way, was borrowed from Peter without permission. Thank you, Peter. He's too nice to complain. So,
I want to talk.
Anyway, so this would be my current forecast, computed at the end of month 1. That was my forecast for the month 1 demand, and that's what it's actually going to be. Not quite perfect. This is my forecast for the month 2 demand, That will be the forecast for the month 3 demand. That will be the forecast they'll generate 1 month from now. And that'll be the forecast they will generate at the end of month 2, which is the beginning of month 3. Right? And so these forecasts kind of swim along there, in a sense. Okay? And these are the actual demands up here. Right? So when Peter and David Heath took this on, the main idea out there in the inventory theory literature to deal with the kind of situation was what's known as Markov modulated demand, which had strengths and weaknesses. The strength was beautiful optimization algorithms. You could take inventory theoretic problems, you could optimize them, you could compute optimal policies. It was just beautiful. And there would be this underlying Markov chain which would move around and would govern the way in which demands were generated. Okay? It also matched managerial insight pretty well. Managers are usually not, from the technical point of view, rocket scientists, and they usually simplify the world. Okay? So you can sit down with a manager and talk to them about their intuition about what their world was like, and you could usually encode a Markov chain to capture that, because it wasn't that complicated after all. Right? And so those were the good things about it. The bad thing about it was that if you're going to work off historical data, it was totally useless. You had 5 years worth of historical forecasts and demands, and you wanted to find a model that would capture that, forget it. There were no models out there. In fact, there were no guarantees that the Markov chain would be of a manageable size, if you were able to do it. But there were no algorithms for doing it either. So if you wanted to go from data, rather than managerial insight, it was a totally useless model. And especially today, how many people sit down and do these forecasts in a human way? Only in small companies. Amazon's got well more than 1 million things they stock. And they don't do this 1 million times with human beings, right? So you need things that run straight off of data and require either no or minimal human intervention, right? And which work. And what Peter and David Heath did met that criteria. So what you do is you take the forecast for the month 3 demand made at the end of month, for the month 2 demand made at the end of month 1, and the forecast for the month 2 demand made at the end of, no, sorry, I said this wrong. Take the forecast for the month 3 demand made at the end of month 1, and the forecast for the month 3 demand made at the end of month 2, and you subtract them. And that gives you this red vector. This red vector is the change in the forecast I generated at the end of month 1 and the forecast I generated at the end of month 2. And this is, and according to the assumptions, which seem to be very accurate, near as I can tell, in every situation I've looked at, anyway, they're ideal. Unless you get in the range where these things are likely to go negative, in which case there's a logarithmic version of this. And so this enables you to go straight into the data in a historical database, the forecasts and demands, estimate the parameters of this thing. It's beautiful. Captures every kind of correlation you can imagine, almost. And so it was very, very nice. And I found it to be a beautiful thing conceptually and very useful to me personally. Right? So as I said, thanks to Peter's done, this is the one that's had the greatest impact on the way I think about problems I solve, and in several cases, the way in which you actually tackle it. The drawback is exact optimization is hard, because the state space is massive. But simulation is a piece of cake. So I found this to be extremely useful and extremely, in many ways, creating a new dimension in the way in which I viewed a lot of the problems that I dealt with. Right? So then Metcalf and Gilder and I said, we're going to take this idea and we're going to use it with semiconductor manufacturing companies. They were giving us a generous amount of money at the time, so we said we're going to do this. There's some differences though, right? This had very short product life cycles because you buy a chip for a cell phone, and 9 months later, you had to have a totally new chip because the line was strong. There's very short product life cycles. The capacity investments were scary. I really felt compassion for the poor guys who had to do this because at the time, it was about 15 years ago, to build a semiconductor fab costed $1 billion. You'd commit the money, 2 years later, the first chip would come out. So you're committing $1 billion based on what you think the cell phone market is going to be 2 years from now. Who's got a clue? So I really felt compassion for guys. But at any rate, another thing that was really different here is that market niches migrate from one product to another. So you take, suppose that I make the logic chips for a Samsung cell phone, right? So next September, a new line width comes out. It's a totally new product from the technical and manufacturing perspective. But it goes into the same market niche. And a lot of the stochastic properties that the product this thing is replacing are inherited. Not all of them. Right? So this was not captured by the MMFE model that existed at the time. And so we said we need to do something about that, right? And so we extended the MFE to that environment. And it was fascinating. We got beautiful database from a very large, famous corporation, not Intel. Intel's a different world. Of all these historical forecasts and demands. And we ran the numbers and found that coefficients of variation, half of them were over 0.7. It's very high. These guys couldn't forecast where it means. But it wasn't their forecasting ability, it was the market. It was the markets they were going into. Another thing is, the correlations. We found a good number of them under negative 0.75 and a bunch more over 0.9. And the positive numbers didn't surprise us that much. The negative ones were extremely powerful. They were huge, right? In absolute value. So we found this interesting. Thought about it, right? You go back to what Peter published, right? It says, well, positive correlations, strong ones, can come from the fact that all of a sudden, Samsung has a problem and that's good for Apple and Apple goes up, right? As that creates September demand for Apple and September demand for Samsung. September demand for Apple, the October demand for Apple, they'll go up and down together. Right? So there's a strong positive correlation. Right? And in terms of negative correlations, he said, okay, total sales are based on fixed quantity contracts, right? If you sell a lot this month, by contract, you're going to sell less next month, right? And so this would drive negative correlations, but I didn't think they'd drive anything near negative 0.75 or so. But in this environment, there's some other things that do drive those kinds of negative correlations. Demand rates for competing brand new electronic products will go up and down. You think about Samsung and Apple. It's good for Apple, it's bad for Samsung, and vice versa. And so if you make chips for both of these guys, which this company did, made chips that went into products that directly competed with each other for different equipment manufacturers, right? Then that's one strong negative correlation. Another one is there's a delay in rolling out the new product. We're going to bring out the Samsung 8 on a certain date. It has to get delayed by 2 months. What does that mean? That means that the demand for the old product goes up and the demand for the new product goes down because the new product's replacing the old. This is going to create extremely strong negative correlations. And the other thing is they all did end of life cycle final builds, right? When they're phasing this thing out, they'd say, okay, what's left is replacement parts, it's small potatoes, we have to have some. Maintaining the capacity to produce these things in the factory is a pain. It's expensive. We don't want to do it. So they make a last-minute decision of the timing and size of a final build, and they wouldn't build anymore. They hoped. Often they would have to. They hoped they'd never build anymore. And they knew they were going to do final builds, but both the timing and the quantities were made at the last minute. So this is another thing that can create very strong negative correlations. So I found the fact that with that wild data set, this is the wildest data set I've ever looked at in my life, but for that industry, it wasn't unusual. The MFE worked extremely well with modifications required by the fact that one generation of product inherits a market niche review. Worked extremely well. So this is a very, very, very robust model. And so finally, Let me just say a few words about Peter. John talked about the teaching methods that Peter, Jack, and John developed. And I had the opportunity to teach this way a lot. And it's a blast. It is so much fun. And I'm very grateful to the three of them for both developing this stuff and allowing me to participate, because it was a huge amount of fun. And I really, really enjoyed it. Peter is, as Ben mentioned, one of the most selfish, unselfish, and high-quality human beings I've met. He was a huge support, friend. I always knew that if there was anything Peter could do for me, he'd do it. And that goes for a number of my other colleagues in this room, too. And those things are deeply meaningful to me. Thank you.
Great.